August 17, 1938, 6:30 in the morning, Chetco River Valley, Southwestern Oregon. The mist hangs low between the trees, thick enough to taste. Frank Morrison, 42 years old, operations foreman for Pacific Lumber Syndicate, stands at the base of a coast redwood that has been growing since before the Roman Empire fell. 23 feet in diameter at breast height, 317 feet tall, approximately 2,200 years old, according to the company dendrologist who counted growth rings on a core sample. 2 million pounds of living wood. Morrison has seen big trees before, spent 20 years in the timber business, from steam donkey operator to crew boss to foreman. He's dropped sequoias in the Sierra Nevada that made grown men weep, but this tree is different. The bark alone is 14 inches thick in places, fibrous and fire-scarred from centuries of low-intensity burns. The base flares out like buttresses on a cathedral, a root spreading 100 feet in every direction, woven into the soil with the tenacity of something that has survived ice ages and droughts and floods that washed away entire mountainsides. The crew has been working this section for 3 weeks. They've cleared the surrounding Douglas firs and hemlocks, built a skid road, positioned the landing. Everything is ready. Everything except this tree. Morrison has brought in new equipment for the job. The company just took delivery of 2 Caterpillar D6 bulldozers and the 9 U Series with the D318 engine. 66 horsepower, 18,000 pounds each. Cable-operated blades, 7 feet wide. The newest technology in logging. The future, according to the salesman. Before the bulldozers, they tried the traditional approach. 2 fallers, Charlie Drummond and Pete Yamasaki, spent 4 days with a 12-foot crosscut saw working from springboards wedged into the trunk 8 feet off the ground to get above the flare. They cut a notch on the downhill side, angled at 45 degrees, deep enough to fit a man inside. Then they started the back cut. The saw screamed through the wood. Sap ran thick as honey. The fallers worked in 2-hour shifts, pulling the saw back and forth, a foot per hour if they were lucky. After 4 days, they'd penetrated 6 feet into the tree. The tree was 23 feet across. They had 17 feet to go. Morrison called it off, brought in the bulldozers instead. The plan was simple. Wrap cables around the trunk, we'll attach them to the D6s, pull while the fallers finish the back cut. The weight of the machines, combined with the hydraulic wedges and the cutting, would tip the tree in the desired direction. A 190-degree fall into the cleared zone. Clean, efficient, modern. Under this video, you'll see a subscribe button, a small action with a big meaning. By pressing it, you're not only supporting the creation of more content like this, but you're also becoming part of the very exchange we've been talking about, giving and receiving in harmony. It's not about the size of the action, it's about the meaning. A simple subscription tells me these words reached you. It tells me that the effort, the late nights, and the discipline to bring this message forward mattered to someone on the other side of the screen. If you want to see how Morrison and his crew faced what happened when they tried to pull that ancient redwood down, please hit that like button. It helps us share more forgotten stories. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to the Chetco Valley. The first D6 arrived at dawn on August 17th. Morrison directed the operator, a man named Tom Hendricks, to position the machine on the uphill side. They wrapped a 2-inch steel cable around the trunk at 10 feet up, looped it through a choker, attached it to the dozer's drawbar. Hendricks engaged the clutch. The tracks bit into the earth. The cable went taut. The engine roared. 66 horses straining against 2 million pounds of immovable wood. The cable snapped. Not at the attachment point, not at a weak link. It snapped clean through in the middle, the severed ends whipping through the air like striking snakes. One end caught the bulldozer's radiator, tore it open. Steam erupted. Hendricks killed the engine and climbed down, his hands shaking. Morrison examined the brake. The cable hadn't frayed, it had simply reached its tensile limit and failed. Said he ordered a thicker cable. 3 inches. Rated for 40,000 pounds. They re-rigged the dozer, this time wrapping the cable twice around the trunk for better grip. Hendricks started the engine again, engaged the clutch. The track spun, throwing dirt and roots. The cable stretched, fibers creaking. The tree didn't move. Then something shifted. Not the tree. The bulldozer, the front end lifted off the ground, track spinning in empty air. The weight of the tree, the mechanical advantage, the simple physics of leverage. It pulled the machine upward like a child lifting a toy. Hendricks throttled back. The dozer slammed down, landing hard on its tracks. The impact broke the right track assembly, sheared the pins clean through. 18,000 pounds of equipment disabled. Morrison brought in the second D6. Same model, same specs, operated by a man named Ray Kowalski. They positioned it on the opposite side of the tree or ran a new cable through a pulley system to distribute the load. Both dozers working in tandem now, pulling at angles that should have created enough force to shift even a tree this size. The math said it would work. Morrison had calculated the vectors, the angles, the combined horsepower. The math was wrong, or the tree was stronger than the math accounted for. Both engines screamed at full throttle. The cables groaned. The tree stood motionless. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the second D6 began to slide sideways. The tracks couldn't hold. The ground beneath them, softened by decades of redwood duff and needlefall, gave way. The dozer tipped, not violently, almost gently. It rolled onto its side with a grinding crash of metal, the cable still attached, pulling it toward the tree like a fish on a line. Morrison stood in silence. Around him, the crew said nothing. Someone coughed. A blue jay called from the canopy. He sent for more equipment. The company dispatched a 1934 LeTourneau Westinghouse electric logging winch from their operation 30 miles north. 20-ton capacity, mounted on a reinforced skid platform, powered by a diesel generator. It took 2 days to transport it to the site, hauling it section by section on log trucks, reassembling it on location. The crew built a deadman anchor, a massive log buried 6 feet deep and chained to 3 standing trees. They ran the winch cable through a series of pulleys, creating a mechanical advantage of 6-to-1. Morrison positioned the fallers at the back cut. They resumed sawing. The winch operator, a man named Dutch Klein, engaged the drum. The cable tightened. The winch motor hummed, steady and relentless, pulling with the force of 20 tons multiplied by 6. 120,000 pounds of pull. The tree moved, just barely, a fraction of an inch. The crew held their breath. The fallers kept sawing. The winch kept pulling. The cable stretched. He's singing a high note in the morning air. Then it happened. The deadman anchor broke free. The buried log, 8 feet long and 3 feet thick, tore out of the ground with a sound like artillery fire. It launched backward, still chained to the 3 standing trees. The chain snapped. The log became a projectile, tumbling through the air, smashing into the winch assembly. The impact destroyed the drum mechanism, bent the frame, shattered the diesel generator's flywheel. Klein jumped clear just before the platform collapsed. That evening, Morrison sat in the company office 40 miles away, explaining the situation to his regional manager. 4 pieces of heavy equipment, destroyed or disabled. 3 weeks of lost productivity. The tree still standing. The manager asked the obvious question, why not dynamite? Morrison had considered it. But this close to the Chetco River with salmon runs and water quality to consider, the Forest Service would never approve the permits. And even if they did, there was no guarantee. The tree's root system was too extensive, too interwoven with the surrounding forest. Blasting might bring down the tree. It might also trigger a landslide that would take out the skid road, the landing, and probably half the crew. They tried one more approach, a walking dredge repurposed from a defunct mining operation. Bay City Dredge Works. Model 442, built in 1924. 50 horsepower charter engine. Designed to excavate riverbanks. It could lift a 1-yard bucket and swing it through a 90-degree arc. The crew modified it, removing the bucket and attaching a 4-ton counterweight. The idea was to use the swing mechanism to create lateral force, hitting the tree from multiple angles in rapid succession like a battering ram. It almost worked. The dredge arm swung. The counterweight struck the trunk with tremendous force. The tree shuddered. Bark flew. The crew cheered. The dredge arm swung again and again. On the 7th swing, the entire walking mechanism collapsed. The base frame, not designed for this kind of lateral stress, buckled. The engine mount sheared off. The dredge settled into the earth at a 45-degree angle, immobilized. Morrison walked away from the tree on August 31st. 2 weeks of effort, 4 machines destroyed, thousands of dollars in equipment losses. The tree remained standing. The company abandoned the Chetco Valley site that fall. It wasn't economical to continue. The surrounding timber had been logged out, and without the big redwood, there wasn't enough board footage to justify the expense. The access road eventually grew over. The skid trails disappeared under ferns and swordgrass. The broken equipment was salvaged for parts or left to rust where it fell. The tree stood for another 46 years. In 1984, a windstorm 100-mile-per-hour gusts coming in off the Pacific finally brought it down, not at the base. The trunk snapped 300 feet up, at a point where lightning had struck decades earlier, leaving a weak spot. The top third of the tree fell into a ravine. The remaining stump, still rooted, sent up shoots. By 2020, those shoots had grown into trees themselves, some of them 60 feet tall, a circle of new life around the ancient base. Morrison never logged another redwood. He transferred to the company's pine operations in eastern Oregon, worked there until his retirement in 1956. In a 1952 interview with Oregon Timber Magazine, he talked about the Chetco tree. He didn't call it a failure, he called it an education. "We thought we could move anything with enough horsepower," he said. "That tree taught us different. Some things aren't meant to be moved, they're meant to stand." The surviving equipment from the Chetco operation, what could be salvaged, was distributed to other sites. The 2 D6 bulldozers were repaired and returned to service. One of them worked for another 30 years before being retired to an equipment museum in Roseburg. The LeTourneau winch was scrapped. The walking dredge was buried on site, too damaged and heavy to move. In 1998, a hiking trail was built through the area. A historical marker now stands near where the tree fell, describing the logging attempt. It doesn't mention the machines, it just gives the tree's statistics. 23 feet in diameter, 2,200 years old, 2 million pounds. The forest has grown back. Young redwoods mix with Douglas fir, hemlock, and cedar. The old skid roads are barely visible, just slight depressions in the earth. But if you know where to look, you can still find pieces of the equipment. A section of cable, half buried in orange with rust. A track link from one of the bulldozers, a chunk of the winch drum, 30 pounds of twisted steel. The wood from the tree that finally fell in 1984 was never harvested. It lay in the ravine, too remote and too heavy to extract economically. Over the decades, it decomposed, feeding the soil, nursing seedlings, becoming part of this forest again. The wood that had defied saws and cables and machines for 2 weeks in 1938 returned to the earth on its own terms. If this story moved you, please like and subscribe. Your support helps us preserve these histories. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from.